Hey guys, so SU fly fishing. No video last week. I was on vacation and I didn't take any videos while fishing. So we're gonna do a video idea I have had for the past few months, and I decided to write it out for this week. I will be fishing this weekend and have video then, but nothing fishy this week. But I do have a list video. My dog is eating, so it might be a little crunching going on back there. So I want to talk about the things that I have gotten better at, or the things that I've learned. And when I say learned, when I was fly fishing in the beginning, there are a lot of things that I knew, and I never really had time to look at or kind of reflect on what I was doing. As far as be able to go back. Usually it was just me fishing with people that were either A, learning, or B, not as good as me. I didn't really have a community of people to bounce ideas off of. It's one of those things where I know I knew some things, I just never had a chance for someone to go, hey, you may not be doing this right. And be able to practice that and bounce it off ideas. Because with Blake and Vincent came Lou, came some other guys that I've been able to sit and talk to that are good. A guy named Nick Shirley. And I mean, there's when you get to hang out with guys who are very good at fishing, very good at fly fishing, and they see you really want to get better, they offer, and they're not rude about it. They don't go to you, man, you sucked up. They actually offer you ideas and they offer you things. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the 7 things that I have learned since starting this YouTube channel. And I'm going to start the list with a idea and an understanding that I always kind of knew, but I never really had the patience for until comp angling. And what I'm going to talk about is high, muddy water. A lot of times when people fly fish, they see high, muddy water. Now, I'm not telling you to go be unsafe. If it's like 8 feet higher than what it normally is, don't fish that. What I'm talking about is it rained an inch last night and the water's up about a half foot, and the water visibility is like 1 or 2 inches. There are still ways to catch fish, and there's still ways to have very productive days. In fact, I have a video out where I was in the middle of a tropical storm and I still caught I want to say 15, 20 fish. I have to go back and look at it, but somewhere around there. But there are tactics and methods to use, particularly colors of flies, a little bit bigger presentations that cast a bigger silhouette, and being more on the bottom and being more willing to kind of slow down your presentation, and that kind of stuff. After really practicing it and then having to go to comps, and I've had to fish, I think, 3 different beats where the water was like almost orange and still catch fish. In fact, I've had beats where in 2 hours and the water was like that, and I've caught 12, 13 fish in a 2-hour period where the water would normally be like, oh, it's going to suck today. What I'm going to talk about now is you don't catch fish fishing the 2 same flies, fishing the same thing over and over and over again. There have been days that I've even videotaped where I have fished an egg until I'm blue in the face and I've only caught 7, 8 fish, and then I got friends that come back behind me using a threaded Frenchie and just 40, 50 fish days. Don't be afraid to change up your tactics. Don't be afraid to change up flies. Now, if you're going there and you're like, let's say you go there and you're like, you know what, I'm just going to practice streamers. That's all I'm doing. Or I'm just going to throw dries. That's all I'm doing. Then do that. That's fine. But if you're going to go there and you're saying, I'm going to catch fish, and this isn't even with just fly, this is with fishing in general. I've had friends who are spin fishing who they're like, man, this spinner or this trout magnet or this jig always catch, and it's not catching fish today. And a couple of people this spring, like just meeting them, talking to them, me suggesting maybe them switch up, or maybe me suggesting maybe they should go a little bit deeper, or a little bit higher in the water, or just switching it up. They're like, I don't want to deal with it. I'm like, well, I've switched, and I'll tell them what I did, and I'll tell them, like, this is what I caught. And they'll look at me and go, okay, well, I'll try. And they'll come back and they'll be like, hey, I've caught, you know, I went from not catching anything to catching like 5-6 fish. And it's a testament to someone that's good at and experienced at angling, that you're able to fish a body of water, different times of the day and year, different water clarity, water, you know, conditions, and still be able to catch fish and not be reliant on an egg pattern, not be reliant on a waltz worm, not be reliant on a squirmy or a mop fly, being able to change up things. And what I'm going to do from that is I'm going to go and almost state something contradictory to what I just said, because knowing how to do a whole bunch of things is paramount to consistently catching fish throughout the day, throughout your fishing day. However, you don't need to bring 100 different flies with you. You don't. I have, for each body of water that I fish regularly, have about 6-7 different flies that I know that if I want to catch fish, I can use them and I'll catch fish almost any time of the year. And that is just attributed to knowing that body of water, fishing it a lot, having a lot of experience in a lot of different types of body of water. And I think that knowing that the difference that these, like, for example, there's a body of water I fish where I'll fish the same fly with the silver or gold bead head, maybe catch one, and then I'll put a pink bead head through that same run and pull out 4 or 5. It's learning your water, but you don't need 100 flies with you at all times. Some people do that. I have 4 fly boxes with me, and the vast majority of times it's the same 2 fly boxes. It is. I used to have 7 put in that little sack, and that's really, it was almost like playing Tetris to get all them in there. You don't need it. You don't need it. I got a dry fly box. I got a junk fly box. I got a small little, very small particular, like small pattern boxes. And then I got a guide box, a box that flies that I like to try and use, see if they do anything different for my guide trips. Now, that being said, are there days where something off the wall is the only thing that works? Sure. And that comes down to the experience with that body of water and you fly fishing. I have 1 or 2 flies that I know that work sometimes, but not all the time. And there are some days when they won't even be touched, but they're in a particular fly box that can situate like in an area, and I rarely touch them ever, except for the days where my 6 or 7 flies that usually work don't work, and then I'll go to them. You don't need to go through 100 flies in a trip to figure out what it eats. You need 6 or 7 good flies, and you need to learn how to fish them very well. And that's with the other changing rigs, changing presentations. You know, am I going to swing this? Am I dead drifting it? Am I doing a Colorado drift? What am I doing that is different? Am I doing a dry dropper? Am I, dead drifting this streamer? Am I jigging the streamer? Am I stripping the just being willing to switch up is how you keep these 6-7 flies and not feel like you have to bring 100 flies. Okay. Well, we're going to go from flies to something that I picked up about 2 years ago. And it's been a game changer for me. It has been nice to my wallet, but it has been eye-opening. Time flies. Do time flies innately make you a better fly fisherman? No. Fishing makes you a better fisherman. But what time fly does is allow you to catch more fish more readily and understand the little differences in between why this hare's ear I bought from, I don't know, name a fly shop. Let's say this hare's ear I bought from Orbis doesn't work as well as this one I bought from Fulling Mill. They're the same bead head, but why aren't they sinking the most? Because Fulling Mill and Orbis are almost synonymous. But just, you buy 2 flies from different places. A lot of times you're going to have little differences. And usually that's because that fly shop is tying for specific things in that watershed. Understanding the difference between just a brass bead and a tungsten bead, a jig hook and a wide gap hook, a streamer hook and a dry fly hook. Understand these little differences. Why does this dry fly hook almost want to pull my fly under, and then this one over here, this dry fly hook, is super thin? Well, what are they? Why? And it allows you to not only pick out very specific patterns and so on and so forth, but allows you to pick the hardware, okay, that you prefer. For me, in nymphs, I prefer a wide gap jig hook 90% of the time. I prefer a slightly oversized tungsten bead head almost every time. Now, there are times where I like to put on something a really small, especially when the fish are being spooky, it's low water, so on and so forth. Small bead head or no bead head. Instead of a tungsten bead, I'll put on a glass bead. And it allows you to pick those differences. And allows you to, let's say you have a particular fly. This pattern right here is very specific to this body of water. And it works great, but for some reason today they're just not eating it. So you go back home and instead of tying a tungsten bead on, you put a glass bead on it, and it doesn't sink as well, but it only stays about that far underneath the water column, but you just start getting smashed. And allows you to see, and understand like that each fly isn't made the same, and that tying flies allows you to make flies specifically for that ecosystem that you're fishing. And it just allows you to have a wider array of knowledge and a wider array of understanding of the patches and the fish. I think tying flies is something that every fly fisherman should get into in some capacity, so that you can learn what exactly it is you're throwing, why some things work, why some things don't, and to be able to distinguish little differences in your presentation of flies as far as what they look like and how they react with water. So I'm going to go from that to tippet protection. Tippet protection for me is probably the most important thing I have in a fly rod. It's right beside presentation capabilities. Everyone likes a rod to feel a certain way and so on and so forth, and I understand that's important. You want to be able to fish a rod that you feel comfortable with. But I think that once you are comfortable with the rod, once you know how you fly fish, once you've got your stuff down, that tippet protection jumps up in importance. Being able to hook into a fish and be confident that when you hook up into that fish, if you've been catching, if you're fishing 6.5X and you've been hooking into 10 to 12 inch little Parmark rainbows, and then you do the same, then you hook up again and it turns out to be a 24-inch fish, you're not going to be, worried about it, line snapping and not snapping. You're going to be pretty confident that when you hook up, that fish is going to stay on there. Tippet protection is super important. Name's not important. Price mark is not important. My 2 favorite rods I have are not the most expensive rods I have. The 2 rods I use the most are not the most expensive rods I have. They're not. The most expensive rod I have is probably my favorite as far as like taking it out and having fun with it. But the rods that I use the most are not my most expensive rods. They're the rods that I've gone to and I feel comfortable spending that amount of money on them, which are my Diamondback Ideal Nymphs. And that I've used enough to where I know that regardless of the day or time, these rods are going to be there over and over and over. And they're going to work great. So tippet protection for me has become super important. Okay. Now I'm going to tackle one more thing about tippet, and then we're going to my most important thing that I learned. And it is that there's a myth. I would say it's a pseudo myth, because there are some times where this is true. And I was a huge advocate of this, especially when I first started. I'm sure in video people talk about this. I talk about this a lot, and that's tippet shy. I would say that 95% of the time that people say something's tippet shy, it's not the tippet that's scaring them. It's the presentation. Are there times where those fish will not eat no matter how good you present it? Sure, yeah, sure. But the vast majority of times, it has nothing to do with tippet unless you know, it's like if you go somewhere that is pressured and you're using, 12-pound mono, and then you're like, I'm not catching anything, and go down to 5X and you start catching fish, you're like, oh, they're tippet shy. No, they're bass, real conventional tackle line shy. What I mean by tippet shy is you going from 5X to 5.5X, a lot of times it's going to make a difference. You going from 5X to 6X, a lot of times is going to make a difference. When you start going down and you start catching more fish, the vast majority of the time it has nothing to do with them being able to see the tippet. It has to do with something that the tippet does. The thinner the tippet, the less water resistance it has. So that means that fly is going to naturally sink faster, and it's going to present more natural. If you're throwing 5X and it's doing this, okay, here's where the line is, and here's where the anchor fly is. It's going to do this. Okay, it's going to get there. It just may not get there pretty, and it may not be doing what you want it to do, especially if there are cross currents pushing and pulling stuff. But if you realize that and you go down to, let's say, 6X because you're not real sure what to do with your rod, and you're just like, okay, well, if I put 6X, it's less, yeah. Instead of being slow, it's going to go a lot more. That's because the current you're fishing with isn't pulling or pushing that line to make it bow. And because of that, the line actually sinks more, and you have more contact with the line, a lot less, room for bites that are super soft. So most of the time, it has nothing to do with the fish seeing the tippet. Because that tippet, after 5X, that tippet is so daggum thin. It's so thin. It's so thin that it doesn't really matter that you keep going lower. What matters is how the fly interacts with the water. The least amount of resistance that water can give your line, the better. So the thinner your line isn't the fish can't see it, it's that your fly is presenting more naturally and allows you to have more tension and more contact with your flies. And people are going to argue with me with that. I'll be honest with you, you can. This is just what I believe after fishing for a long time, and the more I speak with guys who are better than I am, they all pretty much agree with the same thing. And that goes into the last thing. When I started fly fishing on this channel, I knew I was pretty good. I thought I was very good. I would go to my normal rivers and stuff, and most people that day, if they didn't catch anything, I'd catch a dozen. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty good. Nothing humbles you more when you realize when you're fishing against guys that fish more than you, and they've been doing it at that level longer than you have, and they're smoking you. I remember when me and Vincent went to Georgia and did the Gold Cup on the Soapwee. We had a great, I would say a pretty daggum good beat on our second round. And we caught like 21 fish, I want to say. It might be less, but not by a lot. It was right around there. 21, I don't know why that number's sticking in my head, but I think that's it. And it was a slow start to the beat, but then we started to clean up. Vincent figured something out. We went with it, and awesome. And what ended up happening is we thought that we pulled the one with that many fish. Nope, the one on that caught close to 20 more fish than us. And in that first beat, someone caught almost 30 more fish than us. And this is me and Vincent. We're not bad fishermen. Compared to the average fly fisherman, we're pretty daggum good. And I realized that I am an above average fly fisherman. I am not great. I am not super good. I'm not God's gift to the world of fly fishing. I'm above average. I'm brinking on good. And when I mean good, I mean, you know, I can hold my own in most comps. So for me, comping, and what it did was it humbled me enough to where I spent the next, I remember after Georgia, after fishing on the Soakawee on a comp, even though I caught fish, even though I had good and really bad, I the only beat I've ever had where I had a 0 was at the Soakawee. And I just remember like the whole time just thinking, man, that I'm missing something, and it made me go out and get better. So the last thing my last point is, comp angling didn't make me better per se. It made me realize that there was a lot more to learn, a lot more to practice, and my same 3 or 4 methods of fishing don't always work. So now, instead of a regular drift or, you know, float in the cider or whatever, I can do a lot of things with the Euro rod. And I think that when you're learning how to fly fish and when you're getting better and so on and so forth, being able to recognize, you know, that you aren't that good, it allows you to grow exponentially. And I know that I was stagnant for such a long time with fly fishing, that going into comps, meeting Blake and Vincent, and then meeting some other guys that were better than I was, allowed me to realize, like something in my head popped off, like there is so much more than fishing the same few ways I always fish. And then even in that, there's other tendrils of learning that you can go off to. So those are the 7 things that I've learned in fly fishing since I started. There are some things I listen to in some of my old videos and I go, no, I was very ignorant. And I think that us being able to go back in fly fishing and learn these things about, you know, what was wrong, and learn better methods, better ways, whether it be fly fishing, presentation, you know, fly tying, reading water, that we should be open to it, especially when it comes from people that make a living off of it. So that's it for today. That's the video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. I know it's not what I usually do. If you have any questions or comments down below, and hey Mia, you want to say something? Yeah, remember, subscribe to Chad's channel. Yeah. If you want to see more, please subscribe. I got over 150 videos, mostly fly fishing, but some education and then some storytelling and stuff like that. And yeah, get out there, get you some fish, tight lines, blessings, and I'll see you in the next one.